When you, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Troy Cribb, Chair of the General Services Administration Acquisition Policy Federal Advisory Committee, affectionately known as GAPFAC, and I'm happy to kick off this first public meeting under GAPFAC's second charter. Thank you to all our returning members and your amazing contributions under our first charter as we address sustainability issues. I'm so proud of all that GAPFAC has accomplished thus far and the progress that GSA has already made in addressing our recommendations in that area. And welcome to all our new members. We're so excited about the extraordinary bandwidth of experience you bring to GAPFAC. And I look forward to working with you all as we address our new charge under the second charter of advising GSA on policy development and strategies relating to emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. GSA plays an extremely important role in this space, not only through its procurement vehicles, but also through its policy role, its hands-on assistance to other agencies, and its development of new digital services. All of these responsibilities have an enormous impact on the way that our whole government does business and the quality of services that our agencies provide to the people they serve. Every day we look at the news and we see both the promise and the perils of AI and other emerging technologies, and it's an honor to serve on this committee to help GSA reap the benefits and address the challenges. It's also an honor to serve beside Luke Bassis, our co-chair. Luke has been a dynamic leader on GAPFAC over the last 2 years in his leadership of the Policy and Practice Subcommittee, and his on-the-ground experience he brings to the committee from his position with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey has been incredibly helpful in guiding the committee. So Luke, I will turn it over to you now for some further opening remarks.
Sure, Troy. Thank you very much. As you know, my name is Luke Bassis. I'm the Director of Procurement at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It is truly an honor to be back and working with some of the best minds in the country at the intersection of procurement and technology to tackle a new set of priorities for the GSA. I don't know, Stephanie, would you like me to walk us through the overview of the agenda?
I'll let you take it away. That'll be you. Bianca, if you could please provide that slide.
So as you can see, today's public meeting has a full and ambitious agenda. The first order of business will be a FACA briefing presented by Jeremy Anderson. Then we'll get a detailed briefing from Tim Whelan on the key areas identified as priorities for this committee by the GSA. After the briefing, we'll transition to a committee discussion, first on the key focus areas, then on the structure of the committee or subcommittees. Then we'll open the meeting for public comments, and after the public comments, we'll close. I think if there's nothing else, or Troy or Stephanie, housekeeping matters.
Okay, thank you. Well, good day, everyone. My name is Stephanie Hardison. I am the designated federal officer for GAPFAC. And also with us today is Ms. Bianca McIntosh, who is also supporting the GAPFAC as well. Bianca, you just wave so everybody can see you. And then, so real quickly, we'll go into housekeeping actions. This meeting is being recorded. And if you could please ensure that you have your cameras turned on to enhance engagement, it'd be very much appreciated. Please keep microphones muted when not talking. And also use your raise hand and other reaction tools in order to contribute to the discussion. Time management is very important. So if you could please keep your comments concise and focused on the agenda, it would be greatly appreciated. Please know that you can use your chat box if you have any questions or comments, or you have any technical difficulties. Please use the chat box, or you can email myself or Bianca if you have any other issues. There will be time for public comments at the end of this meeting. So for those individuals in the public, if you could please just reserve your comments, we would appreciate it. So at this time, we will begin our roll call to officially start this meeting. What I will do is I will call your first name, and if you could please from there just give your name and organization. That is it. This is your introduction right now to the public as we begin this new endeavor. So we'll start with Dorothea.
Sean Abraham, go by Sean, and I'm from William and Mary.
Dean.
Dean Elderucci from Carnegie Mellon University.
Tiffany.
Tiffany Angulo, State of California Department of Technology.
Richard.
Rich Butel with Source Analytics.
Gordon.
Gordon Bitka with the Information Technology Industry Council, ITI.
Tim.
Tim Cook with ASI.
Matthew.
Matthew Cornelius, Workday.
Nicole.
Nicole Darnell, American University.
Okay. Rivette.
Hi, I'm Ravita Tan at TechBetter.
Omid.
Omega Fai Tabrizi from Google.
Margaret.
Archie Graves from IBM.
Jared. He could not be with us today due to a conflict. James.
Jim Kegel, National Defense University in the Eisenhower School.
David.
David Malone, Acquire IQ Consulting.
Carrie.
Carrie Miller, AI Procurement Lab.
Lindsay.
Lindsay Moore, Developmetrics.
Okay. Nigel.
Nigel Stevens with Phoenix Strategies.
Adriana.
Adriana Tan from Future Ethics.
And Kimberly.
Kimberly Wise White with the American Chemistry Council.
All right. And thank you. This meeting has officially been called and all attendance and a quorum is in place. I'll now turn it back over to the chairpersons.
Great, thank you so much, Stephanie, and Stephanie, thank you to David Kuchenik, who's the deputy federal officer for us, for everything that you've done, as well as Bianca for helping with the logistics here. Do we have Administrator Carnahan yet?
She will be coming on in about 3 minutes, but we did forget Antonio, and I don't know how we.
Oh my goodness!
Yes, how could we have done that?
Not a problem. Hi, Antonio Doss. I'm with the U.S. Small Business Administration.
Thank you.
I think we forgot Farad too. That's
And
what.
Farad, we can't forget Farad.
I went down the list. I don't understand how I could have forgotten you.
I think
Absolutely.
once I associated myself with Antonio, you gave him a bad moment. But I'll leave with associate.
My apologies. Absolutely, my apologies.
I think I also didn't, in my opening remarks, say what I do in my day job, which is I'm Director of Policy at the Partnership for Public Service.
And Luke?
Director of Procurement at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely. So as mentioned, we do have a jam-packed session. There will be a moment in time where we would like you all to make some decisions during this session as far as how you would like to move forward as far as grouping is concerned. And then also we will talk about scheduling as far as how you would like to schedule your time as far as for meetings and things of that nature. It is not without saying that Troy and Luke, we do have a preliminary schedule for you guys, so you will not be starting from scratch. It is not our intent to make this a difficult challenge for you guys, but to make it as easy and as fun as possible and enjoyable as possible, if I must say. We do have the administrator. She is coming on in about 1 minute.
Actually, I'm here now.
Oh,
how you doing?
Wonderful, ma'am. Wonderful. I'll turn it back over to Troy.
All right. Well, welcome, Administrator Carnahan. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I first just want to start by thanking you for your stewardship of GSA over the last 4 years. As everyone on this call knows, GSA is such a busy place, and just whether you've been helping to bring innovation to acquisitions or working to right-size federal property or working to develop digital services, you've always had first and foremost in mind just making the government more effective and better serving the American people. So I want to thank you for your service, and of course, thank you for the support of this committee. And as I had said in my opening remarks before you joined, we're so pleased at the progress that that GSA had made in addressing all of the rounds of recommendations that we made under our previous charter in the area of sustainability. And we're so excited to get underway with our new charge under this second charter. So with that, I will turn it over to you to let us hear your thoughts.
Well, thanks very much, Troy. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you all know this, but this year marks the 75th anniversary of GSA. We were established by Harry Truman in 1949. And I'm from Missouri, so that means a lot to me. And the mission of GSA since the beginning is to make government work better and save money doing it. So that is the way we have done that over the years has changed, just as because technology and lots of other things have changed. But that still is the mission that we stay true to. So I really appreciate all of you from academia and industry and across government to just lend your expertise and time to us as we think about this really important new sort of world in front of us with AI. We're going to continue at GSA to keep driving innovation and efficiency, especially in federal acquisition. And while I will say there are plenty of things for people in DC to disagree about these days, innovation and efficiency and driving that forward, everybody can get on board with. So I feel like this group is really coming together at an important time. I will also just want to point out that as administrator, I've had a chance to interact with a number of these federal advisory committees and see them in action. And I will say it is always incredibly inspiring to me, because what I'm seeing over and over is smart folks who are taking time out of their busy lives to give back to their country. So just thank you for that. I appreciate that everybody on this call can choose to do other things with your time, but you're choosing to do this because you have a desire to serve and to give back. So thanks for that. Also, for the GSA team, it's always inspiring for me to just see how much they just soak up and learn from groups like this, and then go on to do the even harder work, which is actually following through to get the recommendations implemented across government. That is no small trick, but our team is really good to understand sort of how to use those levers to get that done. Before we talk too much about the role of the committee, I want to take a minute to just kind of reflect to me on how far we've come when it comes to thinking about technology and government. And I know some of you all on this committee, and I know that, many of us have been working for a long time, more than 20 years, to figure out how to make government technology really meet the moment. And it feels like we are now in a place where we can actually harness technology to deliver better for the people we serve. I tell a story a lot of times about the first day I used to be Secretary of State in my home state of Missouri, and nothing kept me up at night more than the rollout of some new technology project. It always seemed to go wrong or be over budget or past time or just didn't work, and we had to do it over again. But the first day I showed up in office, it was in 2005, there were 3 times as many people manually opening envelopes and depositing checks to re-register their businesses than we had in our entire IT team. And I wasn't a technologist, but I knew that we needed to get better at all of those things. And so I have seen this trajectory over 20 years, and how we now have this moment where we've got both the computing capacity and the human capacity to do things we've never been able to do before, to analyze just huge amounts of data, and to actually then take learnings from that and apply those to make government work better, faster, and cheaper, as I always talk about. So that's why I'm so excited to have you all here. That's what this mission is all about to me, is like, how do we use technology as an enabler, a force multiplier to empower our teams in government to really do their best work. But, you know, I often remind people that government's basically a service delivery business, if you think about it. People turn to government. Our 300 million customers expect good service. And so I often talk about making the damn websites work as being part of our job here at GSA and across government. But for me, that isn't really about websites. It's not about technology. It's about how you deliver for people, right? It's about the folks that we work for, those 300 million people. How do we build their trust in government? How do we build their trust in democracy that it actually can deliver for them at their point of need when they turn to government? We know that everybody it's just ubiquitous. Everybody's using these tools in their everyday lives. And they expect their interaction with government to also be simple and personalized and easy to use. And there is no doubt with all of the new generative AI tools and technologies, that's only going to elevate people's expectations about actually how government ought to be delivering for them. So trying to keep up with all of that change, I think, is really important, obviously, but we have to do it in ways that actually reflect our values, right, as a democracy. And this is where it gets really hard and sticky, because we have to think all the time as the government, because we serve everybody. We don't choose our customers. We serve all Americans. So we have to think about security and accessibility and responsibility as we roll out every single one of these tools. So I just lay that out there as sort of how I think about what our role is at GSA and what we need to be thinking about across the government. But that means we got a ton of work ahead of us, and to really kind of understand and deploy all of the latest advances, whether it's AI or data analytics or other kinds of cloud computing and cybersecurity, we have got to stay ahead of it. But more importantly, we have got to have a procurement process that is ready to keep up with that pace of change. Because really the only way federal agencies access modern tools is through the procurement process. And so and that's the only way we're going to drive innovation and make things work better for folks. And so to me, that's why this committee and your expertise is so important, because we need that real world conversation about how we keep up with the speed of change and do that in the ways that reflect our values and who we work for. Now, I will say that on this topic of AI, the Biden administration and folks here at GSA have done a lot already to think about how to kind of harness these tools and get them out there. We've been piloting lots of generative AI services. We've been working on different use cases, thinking about things that can be scaled across the government. We have also, if you haven't seen it, you really should take a look. Our team put together an acquisition resource guide for generative AI. And the idea is to help procurement teams. Again, these are often people who are not experts in technology, but do have to sign on the bottom line before the government buys and deploys things. Help them become better informed as buyers of these things and understand the implications, not just the first line cost, but the long-term implications of what we get into and begin to use in the government. We've also spent a bunch of time supporting the administration's AI talent surge. We brought hundreds of new people into the government as technologists. We've been upskilling the folks that are here. We have this AI community of practice that's really big. And it's exciting to me because it's not just technologists that are taking these trainings that Stanford and MIT and others have provided for us. It's procurement officers and it's folks on the front lines who want to know how to use these tools to deliver better on our mission. So that's pretty exciting to me. So here's the bottom line. There's a lot we've done, but there's a lot more that we need to do. One of the things that is really important to me is we need to make sure that we set up a situation where federal agencies are thinking more about working together as an enterprise, not just as this department or that department, but we know we've got a lot of data, we've got lots of information, but it's hard to share right now because there's not much interoperability and sharing that happens. So one of the things that I think I'd love for y'all to think about as we go forward in all of this is how do we optimize for sharing infrastructure, sharing tools, sharing learnings? There's just no time in my book for agencies to have to reinvent the wheel and go down these paths on their own. So it's really important that we avoid just having everybody make the same mistakes. Let's share learnings. Let's set up systems and processes that can help agencies do that sharing. That means not just from agencies that we need the help. We need vendors to actually not just keep innovating, but doing it in ways that reflect those values that we care about: accessibility, privacy, and responsibility, but interoperability too, and to use our leverage and buying power to encourage that kind of movement in the industry. We have a federal acquisition workforce that is really, really good, but it's hard to keep up with the speed of change. And so as we and folks on the committee think about it, think about how we help those acquisition professionals do right by the people that they're serving, because they've got a really hard job to do, but an important one. Because in the end, it's not just about getting those tools, it's also being good stewards of money, of taxpayers. And that's what we need you all to help us think through about as well. So I'll just wrap it up with that to say, I'm excited. I think this is a really extraordinary moment that we're living through right now. I think we have a chance to dramatically improve people's lives if we get this right. I think it's within our reach to get that done, but it's only going to happen if we really are working hand in hand on what reasonable policy guardrails look like, and how we can set our people up to be able to meet the speed of change and the speed of need in all of this. So again, just thank you for your time and lending your time and talent to this. It's a big deal, and there aren't many times in, I think, your careers for any of us when we know the work that we do can have a huge and lasting impact on millions of people. And I think we're at that inflection point right here on this topic. We can either just sort of, as a government, sort of let it all sort of play out and try to play catch up, or we can sort of try to be abreast of what's happening and help guide this in a way that reflects our values and really serves the American people. So thank you for sort of taking up the cudgel with us. We have high expectations and really excited to have you working with our team. So thanks very much. And I don't know who's next. Jeff, is that you?
It is. And Robin, thank you. Terrific opening comments. Really appreciate you sharing those thoughts. Today's kickoff, folks, it's an important symbolic moment. We think that AI and emerging technology is going to greatly change the very practice of federal acquisition and may do so faster than we can even imagine. Last month, we held an administrative meeting where you all were formally sworn in as members of the advisory committee. I had the opportunity then to thank you for agreeing to serve in this critical role and to share our reasons for renewing this committee and for choosing this topic. As you get started, I want you to recognize much of your work is going to be foundational to the federal acquisition community. We're going to be plowing new ground together. Amongst the areas where we think you can be most helpful, establishing common definitions. Right now, we lack a common vocabulary. We need one to ensure meaningful collaboration between government, industry, and stakeholders. Recommending consistent terms and conditions. Clear rules of the road are both essential business enablers and guardrails. Preparing our workforce for the changes to come. The acquisition workforce is already using generative AI. We need to help them with safe, secure, and appropriate use so they can focus and help government deliver for the people. And I'm sure there's a long list of things we haven't even thought of yet. That's exactly why we need your expert wisdom, your ideas, your thoughts. For today, and just in the interest of time, I'll cut it here with a simple thank you. You have our gratitude, and I look forward to working with you. At this point, Troy and Luke, let me return the floor to you.
Well, great. Thank you both so much. And Luke, I think I turn it to you to tee up the next segment.
Sure. Thank you. So Jeremy Anderson will now provide the committee with the FACA briefing. Jeremy Anderson is an attorney in the Fiscal and Administrative Law Branch of the GSA's Office of the General Counsel and has over 20 years of experience as an attorney in the federal government. He began his federal career while in college, working as a forestry aide and firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service. Following law school, Mr. Anderson served in the U.S. Air Force, deploying twice to Iraq. After leaving active duty, he has worked in a variety of administrative law roles, first for the Air Force and now for the GSA. Jeremy Anderson, thank you for your service. The floor is yours.
So can everybody see the screen? That's test number one of the Luddite attorney. We're good. All right. So thank you very much for that introduction. As I said, my name is Jeremy Anderson. I'm an attorney here at General Services Administration, and I'm just going to run through an overview of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. I know this is going to be a review for some of you. Some of you it'll be brand new. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds, but just kind of want to give you a picture of what this is and what it means. The United States government has used advisory committees since the early days of the Republic. The first thing that we could call a FACA committee was actually occurred during the Whiskey Rebellion. So George Washington was the first executive of our country to use an advisory committee to help come up with the best way forward. Sometimes the government needs to get advice from outside sources, but the public also has a right to know who's influencing the decision making. And so the FACA tries to balance those two interests and sets up a framework whereby General Services Administration or other agencies can get advice from outside parties while still holding those key attributes of fairness, accountability, and transparency that are key for government working. Since 1972, the Federal Advisory Committee Act has been the framework for using advisory committees. It's been amended a couple of times, and there are some other statutes like the Sunshine Act that also play into how this is done. But primarily, it is the Federal Advisory Committee Act that governs what we do. So what is a FACA? When does a FACA apply? A FACA exists when these three things coincide. First, at the top circle, when the group includes non-federal members, as is obviously the case here. If people from FAS meet with OMB, DOJ, National Archives, that's not a FACA because that's just federal members. But when you bring in non-federal entities and members, that's part of what makes it a FACA. Also, it has to be providing consensus advice. That doesn't mean that everybody on this committee has to agree with the final advice. There can be minority opinions, there can be dissent, but the idea is that you come up with some sort of consensus advice. So when GSA goes out and engages in listening sessions or public meetings, engages in tribal consultation, FACA is not implied there because it's not about getting a central piece of advice. And then that bottom right circle is that we exercise some control over the group. GSA appoints the members through the administrator or the designee. An example that people have sued to try and say was a federal advisory committee that not is the ADA. ADA provides consensus advice from non-federal members about judgeships and judicial appointments, but because the federal government does not control the ADA, that's not subject to the FACA, and they're able to give that independently. Here with GAP-FAC, all three things meet, and as a result, we have to follow the rules that the FACA imposes on us to make sure that we are doing things above board, that there's fairness, accountability, transparency in all that we do. GSA happens to not just be the host of this particular Federal Advisory Committee, but we hold a key role in all Federal Advisory Committees, and that we monitor and run the program. We run the FACA Secretariat, So as a result, I think, in my own totally unbiased opinion, we have an advantage over a lot of FACAs in that we have the best committee management officers and resources, because the people who are the experts on the Federal Advisory Committee Act are here. I saw at least one of them is on this call. Probably going to provide notes on my briefing after. But we've got a lot of expertise on how this works. GSA, we do reviews and gather annual reports. We help other agencies establish and renew their committees, and we maintain a database that tracks all sorts of information that is then published online. You can go there, just Google FACA database. It'll be your first hit, and you get information on all approximately 1,000 federal advisory committees that exist across the government. Yes. All right. So now there are multiple types of FACAs. They can be created through an executive order. They can be created by a statutory mandate, or they can be created through discretionary authority. So like the administrator goes and creates one. And sometimes they switch. Something could be created by statute, and that statute has a sunset date, and then the agency can decide to keep one on along as an optional group or as a discretionary authority committee. They are created out of federal employees, some of whom we met here today. And then there are people who are special government employees and representative members. Now, each of those categories don't really mean much when it comes to participation in the group. It does create different ethics requirements, but that's not so much for you to worry about. Your DFO and our CMO will help us guide everybody through and make sure that everybody meets the requirements that fit with whatever category of member of the committee they are. Our committee management officer, I alluded to that before. Every agency that has a federal advisory committee is supposed to have a committee management officer, and that person helps run the FACA program at that agency. And then we have our designated federal official. They're the link to the agency. And I'll repeat this advice again later. But as you go forward, be nice to your DFO and be nice to our CMO. They do a lot of work, and they're trying to be helpful and make sure that everything moves along smoothly. And all we can do to help them do their difficult jobs is key. Every committee needs to maintain file a charter, and it's got to provide committee details. Now we have to provide balance plans. And your DFO and the CMOs are going to help make sure that all of those wickets get crossed appropriately, and we move forward in a way that complies with the requirements that Congress has put on federal advisory committees. So as we talk about the various types of interactions you have during the committee's life, again, keep in mind that many of the requirements are based on providing transparency. So first up there, the welcome mat. Generally, advisory committee meetings are noticed and open to the public. We'll put out notices in the Federal Register and sometimes send out press notices whenever they meet. During meetings, the chairperson runs the meeting according to an established agenda. The DFO usually provides opening remarks at the start of each advisory committee meeting and subcommittee meetings, stating the meeting is subject to FACA requirements and for ethics purposes, whether the membership is made up of SGEs, RGEs, representatives, or combinations of the three, and if members were reviewed for conflicts of interest. For in-person meetings, DFO should usually sit next to the chairperson or co-chairperson at the table to monitor actions for FACA compliance and confer with the chairperson or co-chairperson and assist the advisory committee or subcommittee as necessary during the meeting. Committees are expected to engage, committee members are expected to engage and participate. The chairperson and co-chairperson, along with the DFO, should create a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility by encouraging engagement, participation, and expression from all advisory committee and subcommittee members and any members with dissenting opinions as applicable. If the meeting is a webcast, we may ensure that it's clear who is speaking, and remember that the video will be posted on the committee website. This will go down on the permanent record. The purpose of public comment period is for the public to provide input for you to consider as you develop recommendations. It is not to engage in a dialogue. The chairperson will manage the public comment period, introduce each person who will provide a public comment, and manage the time limitations for each individual. DFO will work closely with the chair to manage this process. It's critical that the public understand the process for you to use in your use of the committee. Between meetings, a quorum of the committee members should not meet, not in person, not virtually, not by teleconference, not over email, not with a FAC, not in the box, that should not occur. In order to discuss substantive meetings. This could be considered a meeting under the FACA and would violate the act since the public has not been invited. This includes exchanging substantive emails among a quorum of committee members or the full committee. So do not reply all on emails with committee or subcommittee work. But you should include the DFO in all substantive work, regardless of format for this committee. For example, include them on calls, copy them on emails, and make sure they are aware of your substantive activities and what you are doing. Obviously, reasonable minds can differ as to what constitutes substantive versus administrative work. When in doubt, please ask before engaging in anything that could be possibly considered substantive work, so that we can make sure that it is done properly and in accordance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. As far as public and press interactions, when referring to your membership status on the committee, you can mention it in your bios and CVs, but it should not be given any more importance than any of your other affiliations. And please notify the DFO if you receive a request related to your committee or the nature of it. Any press inquiries, please notify them. Committee members must provide a disclaimer at the start of all interviews that they're only speaking in their individual capacity and are not speaking on behalf of the committee or GSA. Committee members should only speak about topics that they have discussed in public meetings. Information that is not public should not be brought up. As a general rule of thumb, discuss only that which is available on the website. Point to the website and the public meetings if you're asked about the committee's opinions or thoughts. That is where they are recorded, and that's where they can go and find the public advice. There is the database that is maintained by GSA. The committee has a website which is managed by your DFO. There's a publicly available FACA database managed by the CMS that will list you as a member on the committee. The database will include basic information, including committee memberships and costs for every chartered committee in the executive branch. And then under 10B of the public law, FACA, we are required to ensure that records related to advisory committee meetings or advisory committees are available to the public in a timely manner. Again, this is done through the website, and it allows the public to understand what's going on. Records that are available to the public include reports, transcripts, minutes, working papers, drafts, studies, and agendas. These records are available for public inspection and copying. What is not included, records that are exempt from the FOIA exemption 5, records that would be exempt from release under the FOIA, with the exception of the deliberative process exemption, are exempt. So if there's privacy information, proprietary government or proprietary company information, classified things, exemption 9, my personal favorite, geographical information regarding wells, that would be withheld. Probably not going to happen with this committee, but the FOIA exemptions do apply with the exception of the deliberative process exemption. And like I said, there is a website. We've kind of touched on these a little bit before, but just to reiterate who the committee members are. Committee members, that's all of you. You're appointed to serve on specific roles on the committee. Some appointments are subject to ethics and conflicts of interest laws and regulations. Refer back to your appointment letter for specific membership designation and appointment terms. The letter should identify you as either a regular government employee, special government employee, or a representative member. As a member, you're expected to attend and participate in public meetings and any subcommittee meetings you're appointed to. Within the committee membership is the chairperson role. The chair is the committee leader and is responsible for coordinating with the committee membership and DFO regarding technical aspects of committee work. Chair runs public meetings according to the pre-approved agenda, keeps committee members focused on areas relevant to accomplishing the committee's charge. Chair typically moderates the meetings and determines when comments are not relevant, when it's time to end discussion, when a topic should be assigned for future discussion, or when discussions should be tabled for another meeting. The chair also certifies meeting minutes and coordinates the final work products for submission to the agency receiving the committee's advice. Next, we have the DFO. Like I said before, be nice to your DFO. The DFO is your central point of contact for all things related to the committee. The DFO's primary role is to ensure that the committee and its meetings comply with FACA. It is important for you to work completely with your DFO to ensure FACA compliance and assist you in any way you need to do the work of the committee. And I am counsel to that DFO. When they have questions that they do not know the answer of, they'll go to me or to the CMO to make sure that they're doing things correctly. DFO is responsible for all the day-to-day operations management of the advisory committee, which includes drafting meeting agendas, distributing materials to the advisory committees, preparing Federal Register notices, announcing public conference calls and meetings, attending calls and meetings, keeping records of committee deliberations, making committee materials and minutes available to the public, ensuring all advisory committee members have the logistical information necessary to attend the meetings, and receiving and public and distributing public comments to committee members. Like I said, DFO is the point of contact for any needs during the public meetings, and be nice to your DFO. And then finally, there is the committee staff. Hold on. Sorry if I'm not advancing my slides correctly here. I'm not used to running both the talking and the pointing part of it. The committee staff are there to support committee activities and provide background materials and answer committee technical questions. What the committee staff cannot do is work collaboratively with the committee on the work product. FACA requires committees to provide independent advice and not jointly work with agency staff to generate a solution to a problem. Staff also cannot provide feedback on a committee's proposed recommendations before they are finalized by the committee and transmitted to GSA. So to recap, under FACA, there are committee members, which include the chairperson, the DFO, and committee staff. Everyone else is a member of the public. This distinction is important because committee information and work should not be shared outside of the committee structure. For example, if the committee is working on a deliverable, the members should not be sharing the draft work products with their organizations for input or opinion. And the committee staff should not be sharing products within GSA for input. I know that sometimes can create difficulties with your other employers and your day jobs where they might want to know about those things, but in order to comply with the FACA, the incomplete deliverables should not be shared outside of the committee. And then just final point here is talking about committee meetings. FACA requires that all committee meetings be open to the public. An exception to that is the type of meeting that we are having now, which is called, well, actually, this is not an administrative meeting, is it? But an exception would be an administrative meeting, because administrative meetings don't involve substantive work of the committee. They're not required to be open to the public, but they can be. Another exception is a preparatory meetings where members are convened solely to conduct work, such as gathering information or conducting research. Public meetings, whether they're open or closed, can be held in person, via teleconference, virtually, or in a hybrid environment. But all must be noticed publicly to a minimum of 15 days in advance through a meeting notice published in the Federal Register. And in order to comply with that 15 calendar day period, DFO usually needs at least 30 days of a head start in order to be able to draft, receive approval, submit for publication, and get published that Federal Register notice. It doesn't happen just overnight. It takes a bit of work. What that means is the committee cannot be scheduled and meetings can't be scheduled and held on the spot. They require advanced planning. It also means committee meetings cannot be spontaneously closed. Meetings can be closed as long as it's approved in advance by GSA's general counsel and the GSA administrator, but the reason for closure meets one of the criteria in the Government and Sunshine Act. It's probably not going to happen with this committee, but it is possible. So you should be getting the gist now that FACA is a very procedural act. There are certain things that have to be done, and they have to be done in certain orders in order to comply with the Federal Advisory Committee Act. The public is also allowed to file written statements with the committee, and depending on the agenda, may provide oral statements during committee meetings. The DFO must be present at every committee and subcommittee meeting. The same goes for committee and subcommittee chairs. Meeting minutes are required for every meeting, open to the public or closed, and for administrative and preparatory meetings. And the chairperson must certify the minutes within 90 days of the meeting. After certification, the meeting minutes are going to be posted on the committee website. That, as exciting as it is FACA in a nutshell. I appreciate your patience as I go through these technical hoops that we have to jump through. But as you are aware of those, hopefully they'll help make this work go smoothly and everybody can be able to have a meaningful experience as they participate. Thank you all for your attention. And thank you so much to everybody who helped put this together.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that comprehensive briefing. It's a lot of information, I know, and I know I didn't coin this term. We've heard it elsewhere, but when in doubt, reach out. Stephanie can guide us to any answers that we may have during the course of our work. So any questions, any incidents that come up, just reach out and seek guidance. I think, Stephanie, we have on the agenda a 5-minute break now, but we finished a little early.
We do, and we are a bit ahead of schedule right now. And I will just go back to Jeremy's brief. As he said, he gave that brief in about 25, 30 minutes. It could go a bit more in depth, but if you have any questions regarding the Federal Advisory Committee Act, please just send us a note and a notice, and we'll make sure to get with Jeremy to address any questions and concerns that you may have. Absolutely. So Jeremy, Luke, would you like to take a break now? A 5-minute or 10-minute? I will leave that up to you and Troy to make that decision based on the discussions that we would like to have in a few minutes.
So Troy, what do you think?
Sure, I just want to, Tim, or would you be ready to go? And maybe if we had a 10-minute break and.
I can be ready to go whenever you would like.
Okay. Well, why don't we have a 10-minute break? Give everybody, folks, just a few minutes longer for the break, and or reconvene maybe at in 12 minutes at 10 till. No, at noon.
At noon.
The math is wrong.
All right, so we'll be right back at noon. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you then. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, it is now 12 o'clock. Begin this second segment of our session. I'll now turn it back over to our chairs, Troy, Luke.
Oh, great. Thank you, Stephanie. And it's my pleasure to welcome Tim Whalen of GSA to talk with us now. Tim is a retired Coast Guard commander, and since retiring in 2011, he served at the DHS Acquisition Career Manager for Program Management and Information Technology, and then subsequently as Technical Advisor for the Federal Acquisition Institute. And this summer he completed studies at the National Defense University and is currently serving as advisor to the GSA Senior Procurement Executive, Jeff Kosis, who we heard from earlier, on the subjects of AI and emerging technology, which is what leads Tim here today to talk with us. And Tim, we're so glad to have you here and to get a little further detail on some of the subject matter areas that Jeff flagged for us, where GSA may want this committee to dig down deeper into and provide some input. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much. And as I pull up my slides, I will say I too, like the administrator, am from Missouri. And so I am glad to help us help find you to help you show me, GSA, where we can have some good advice to proceed forward with emerging technology. And can everyone see my slides? Okay, very good. I get it. Okay, so within GSA, we have developed an artificial intelligence and emerging technology steering committee, operating both in parallel to this committee, but with additional roles as well. Focused on AI and emerging technology and supporting the GAP-FAC. And it's to foster communication and collaboration across GSA to discuss these items and find out what are our challenges, where are we finding success, et cetera. So from that perspective, for the GAP-FAC, we are identifying and communicating those challenges that we are facing so that you can know where we could best benefit from advice, or how do we overcome the challenges that are presented? Because as was mentioned before by the administrator, there are a lot of great opportunities with AI, but there's a lot of challenges associated with those as well. And my role and the GATE Steering Committee's role is also to be able to facilitate GSA support for the GAP-FAC, so that we can find the right parties within GSA and the right personnel available to support your work so that you can best support us. The membership right now of the is about 35 personnel, and it's from across GSA, including the Office of Government-Wide Policy, which I am in, the CIO's office, and the Public Building Service, Federal Acquisition Service, and our Technology Transformation Services. It includes perspectives covering all of GSA's interests with AI, acquisition policy, supply chain risk, privacy, innovation, data management and its use within the organization, information security, acquisition workforce, acquisition processes, and automation. All of those subjects are represented by the members, and we're all interested in making sure that we do those right. We recognize that AI and emerging technology create a dynamic environment. We want to take advantage of it. We want to be able to react to the emerging technology. AI being the fastest adoption rate in the business world ever, outpacing the internet and the personal computer, presents great opportunities for the government. Also has a rapidly changing environment for law, regulations, and policies. There's congressional actions that have already occurred and more that are planned. Presidential executive orders have come out, and OMB policy memos have all come out, all setting a stage for adopting and acquiring AI, but also setting down some of those concerns that we need to address when doing so. The environment and technology is changing very rapidly itself. So how do you make sure that policies and guidance stays up to date? How do we take advantage of AI and adapt to the new technology, change those changing laws and emerging threats, whether it's the volume of contract proposals we receive or cybersecurity? So they can be just implementation and reaction threats, but also actual damaging threats as well. GATE initial analysis, we recognize the opportunity that the GAP-FAC presented us. You're focused on AI and emerging technology. We can use your advice, and we want something that's beneficial to GSA and to the public. We want to reduce our risks. We want to make sure that we're not creating undue burdens on industry that's replying to these, whether it's small businesses or extra requirements that industry would not foster competition. We want to make sure that the United States is able to innovate and be competitive in the AI environment. We identified a wide range of potential areas across GSA, and all of the GATE members provided input regarding those priorities. From those, we have 4 broad questions that we developed, And I have representatives here that can follow up and answer additional questions and discuss with you some of the more details or particulars that you might like to know. But the AI and the acquisition workforce, the workforce in general, and preparing it, that was the #1 item on the list. How do we prepare GSA's workforce to acquire AI? How do we provide them with a breadth of knowledge, tools, and guidance to do so efficiently, fairly, safely, and securely? Common theme is making sure that we do so safely and securely. Whether that's training, usable guidance, understanding of AI deliverables, and how to incorporate AI into our processes and make sure it's done fairly and equitably. AI contract terms and conditions. How does the acquisition workforce choose the right ones and apply them when they do so correctly? How do we develop usable contract terms and conditions that promote competition, continued innovation, and ensure that safe, secure, and trustworthy acquisition process takes place? Making sure that those terms and conditions are realistic and the requirements and scope don't provide an undue burden on businesses, so that we can maintain and promote competition and innovation. Are templates a possibility? Can we use those? And if so, what should they include? AI acquisition organizational data readiness. How can GSA best pursue acquisition strategies that safeguard the government's data, ensure that AI process data continues to be protected, and promotes data awareness to achieve our strategic goals? We want to make sure our data and systems are tied to our business goals, but we also want to make sure, once again, that the government data is protected and the overall security and privacy is maintained. That we understand the data that we're using for business purposes. And then overarching all of that is the common definitions and governance frameworks to pull that all together, so that the acquisition workforce can use contract terms and conditions and develop systems that use our data in a way that supports our business together. So we have three kind of more specific questions, and then the broader one that's designed across everything. How can GSA best establish and maintain definition, standards, and governance frameworks needed by the workforce to support AI acquisitions? And across these areas today, for the first two, I have Chris Mullins from the Office of Government-Wide Policy, who can represent and speak in more detail to acquisition workforce and the terms and conditions areas. Within the data readiness side, I have Jocelyn Feldspouch and Matt Crothers, who can speak to the business and technical aspects of what we need and what we're looking for. And then overarching, and the biggest job, is Zach Whitman, our Chief AI Officer, is also here today and can provide a broader perspective, how we can tie all of that together and what our challenges are. And with that, that is the conclusion of my presentation, right on time with the 10 minutes, Stephanie. Stephanie, you're on.
I said thank you, Tim. And then I just wanted to turn it over to Troy or Luke.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask if Chris and Jocelyn, Matt and Zach, would they want to add anything that's been said before we kind of jump into our committee discussion?
Yeah, I can add, certainly. This is Chris Mullins, and I'm in the Office of Government-Wide Policy, work with Tim, and, report to the Senior Procurement Executive at GSA. And I can add a little bit more detail to the first and second item that Tim mentioned. I don't know if it would be helpful to y'all, Tim. Maybe we can keep showing, or Bianca, we could keep showing that last slide with the 4 topics again.
Yeah, that would be great.
So people can read it again and then internalize it a little bit more. So on the first topic, I just want to add a little bit more flavor to it, and speak to the breadth of what GSA buys. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Federal Acquisition Service, and primarily when you think about IT and technology, you think about the Federal Acquisition Service. With our mass IT category, our scheduled IT category offerings, and other GWACs like Alliant, vets, 8A stars, all these contract vehicles that specifically offer IT software, hardware, telecom, and we're offering it across government. So all these other agencies across government are buying off of these vehicles. And so I think that's where most people's mind go to when you think of GSA and technology and how AI might be integrated. But we also wanted to make sure we highlighted that really technology, I'm sure is no surprise to you all, is becoming pervasive across GSA. Within our public building service, they're increasingly becoming connected to technology and the Internet of Things. For example, when you think about just custodial services, the operations and maintenance of our buildings, we have building automation systems now that are highly technical and connected, and think more with more logic about, being more proactive about fixing the building or maintaining the building. We do obviously a lot of construction in our public building service, but what we construct often has so much technology built in. Just one example would be, building a new command center or an operational control center at a building headquarters that, of course, the majority of the work's going to be the walls and the finishing and the electrical and the water and everything like that, plumbing. But obviously we're putting in a lot of technology into those kinds of spaces as well. With fire alarms and thermostats and all of that. And so, how to support the acquisition workforce at GSA, can be pretty broad, and we're very much, interested in your input on guiding us. Can we provide knowledge and tools and guidance that speaks to all of those folks, or should we take a more phased approach where we're focused on a specific category at first or industry, and then we grow from there perhaps, or learn from that, and then iterate from there. So that's a little bit on the workforce. I don't know if you want me to stop for some questions, or I can also add a little bit more flavor to the terms and condition item too.
So I would just ask at this time, does anyone have any questions as it relates to the acquisition workforce? Would there be any follow-up information that you would need at this time, or would you just like to move forward?
Well, yeah, I think we'll have plenty of time in future meetings also to get deeper dives on these. So I was just trying to get maybe just a little more flavor of each of these four.
Tim
And then
has
open it up to the floor. But I think Rich, you had your hand
has
up,
raised his hand,
maybe?
yeah.
Yeah, Troy, I'll wait then so we can move forward.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. So that's acquisition workforce, just keeping in mind, people may primarily be buying construction services or buying, an HR system, but IT or technology or artificial intelligence may not be top of mind for them, but certainly going to be relevant for the procurements we do across the entire organization. Moving more into terms and conditions, just adding a little bit more flavor into that and detail into that. Jeff mentioned standardizing and gave an example of definitions. That's touched on in item 4 as well, but is also relevant for terms and conditions. And so we would love to understand more where we can standardize wherever possible. And how broad can that be? Or, are different sectors so different that maybe, again, we need to focus on certain industry sectors when we talk about terms and conditions. We want to, as much as possible, provide our workforce, more detail and the guidance and support them as they're venturing into this somewhat new space that they may not be comfortable with. But we also don't want to provide so much detail that we hamper creativity or innovation, or especially competition. We want to make sure that we're not being so prescriptive that we're limiting the vendors that we may be getting, solutions from. So very much open to your thoughts on that. And then, as Administrator Carnahan kind of mentioned, want to be more in tune at the time it's coming out with how these things are developing and not lagging so much. And so I'm sure you all are thinking about some of these things too. And so, maybe it's worth reflecting on what are your organizations doing, or what do your organizations have in place in this space in terms of terms and conditions, and how you're procuring things that are relevant in the technology or AI space. So that's all I really have to add in terms of a little bit more detail. But again, open any more questions or follow up in future meetings.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Can we hear from a Jocelyn or Zach?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I'm really excited to hear GapFAC team start to mull on these, and I think we've gotten some great overviews from Tim and Chris. I think we all recognize this dynamic space. We understand that we're all working together. We know that this is a general problem set that is occurring across the federal complex, and we hope that these questions are resonant with you guys, not only in terms of what you're seeing in the federal workforce and the federal government, but also in the commercial space as well. We're looking to understand how we can better partner and be better partners, especially as we're sharing and using these emerging technologies. I think the concepts of standardization where we can, in terms of common definitions and governance frameworks, really lend themselves for the entirety of these questions. We want to make sure that we're speaking the same language. We're communicating clearly. We have a clear sense of understanding between what kind of contracts we're letting and what we'll end up receiving. Data and our readiness to leverage these technologies is ultimately critical, both from an internal perspective, but also in terms of how we assess the risks and the tolerances of the systems that we are procuring. And that's core to a lot of the requirements that have been put forth, both by Executive Order 14110 as well as M2410 and M2418. It's really critical that we, the government, know what we're buying, know what the implications are of those purchases, know how those terms and conditions will be leveraged, and ultimately that we enable our workforce to be as effective as possible. And so we think that this is going to be a collaborative, ongoing engagement where we can further grow the maturity across the federal government. Anyway, wanted to get that in there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think Matt had his hand up.
Yeah, we had a couple of people with their hands up. Matt?
No, I think Zach was able to sort of address what I was going to add, so I have nothing more to add.
David, I think you have your hand up.
I do, and I know we'll have more time for questions about these questions going forward, but there's a broad theme here that I want to make sure I understand, and that is 3 of the 4 questions are asking about the acquisition of AI. And I guess I'm wondering if there are any questions related to the use of AI in the procurement process.
I can say that is part of within the that is definitely part of what is being looked at. And if you see the last highlight in blue under the acquisition workforce is actually exactly that, incorporating AI into acquisition processes. So that is one aspect of the workforce. How do they do that? How do they do that effectively as well?
Okay, thank you. So that is a part of what we should be thinking about.
Yes, please.
All right, thanks.
Oops. And sorry, I need to flip over to see if I know who had their hands up first, but I know that Jocelyn, Antonio, and Rich all also have their hands up.
So let's go ahead. We'll go with Jocelyn. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I was going to just add that is definitely part of what we were interested for the workforce. And I think that can also tie into even the data component in terms of process. So I just wanted to also give my concurrence on that topic. We do currently at GSA work to make the acquisition process more efficient in many ways, using data and using emerging technologies where we can. So that is something that we are very much interested in as well.
Great.
Thank you. Can we go, Antonio?
Yeah, my question kind of ties a little bit back into David's. One of the things that is increasingly a challenge for a lot of small businesses, just the cost associated with pursuing federal procurements and the kind of the complexity of what goes on with that whole acquisition process. So I'm wondering to what extent we might be able to evaluate and consider some ways to leverage AI to improve the process from a small business perspective or any potential supplier's perspective for that matter, to somewhat demystify and make the process more timely, any kind of ways where maybe we could get to help businesses understand what their real opportunities are without expending as much cost and effort that typically goes into it, particularly in light of the fact that so many businesses are now also starting to leverage AI in their own proposal development, which means more is being tossed over the fence, so to speak, to the acquisition force to try to manage and consider those proposals, which can further kind of clog the wheels, if I could use that type of terminology. So generally, that's where I'm looking at. How do we make sure the customer, the supplier, has a real prominent focus in this effort?
Thank you, Antonio. Wonderful question. Rich?
Yeah, I just want to foot stomp the comments from the three previous folks with whom I emphatically agree. I think we should be looking at AI to improve acquisition tradescraft and to streamline and expedite the system. I give a specific example from yesterday's FAR listening session that was hosted by Jeff Kosis and the team, where a lady talked about the 6 to 12 month lead time and work associated with doing cost realism assessments for cost reimbursement contracts, even for those bidders who have no chance of winning the job. This is an onerous and complex review process that is mandated by the FAR. It seemed to me that an AI special assistant to automate this process would be one immediate tactical improvement we could make to acquisition tradescraft.
Thanks, Rich. And actually, maybe before we go on, can I ask, can the GSA folks stay on with us for a bit, because we're gonna kind of now move in. I think we're already segueing into kind of discussion about what of these issues resonate with the members of the committee. I just wanted to give a chance for folks to ask questions of the GSA team while they could be with us, but are you able to stay on a bit more in case there are more questions as we move on to the next part of our discussion?
They are.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great, because I think that this has been kind of the perfect segue into what we wanted to do next, which was just to have a discussion about what's resonating with the members of the committee, and then move into a discussion of, based on that, how might we want to try to organize ourselves going forward. And Luke has some slides to tee up to engage us in that discussion. So Luke, I will turn it over to you.
Sure.
So Tim, can you stop sharing, please?
Yeah.
So the first slide is really more of a recapture of what we just discussed. But we wanted to try to frame your reaction. This is probably the first time this group has seen these topics substantively. We wanted to get your input, each one of you, to the extent you're able to talk. How do you, what's your hot take to these, and how do you feel they should be prioritized? And all the while keeping in mind that we intend to conduct deeper dives. And we're going to have to conduct deeper dives in order to make informed recommendations to the GSA. We're lucky to have the subject matter experts here if there are any additional questions that come up. But I would like to go through folks maybe we haven't heard from yet. Ravid, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to address this question, kind of how it strikes me and kind of order of importance. So there are 2 points I want to make. One, I see the contract terms and conditions as something being kind of at the utmost importance. I think today, because we do have a lot of frameworks and a lot of definitions and a lot of it is voluntary, there's a tendency for those things to all merge into the blurry background of just like a lot of, and people don't know what to do. Something like terms and conditions, I think, can really get people moving because it is going to be obligatory. So to me, I see it as a potential driving force for all of the, 4 pillars. In addition, I want to highlight a comment that was already made. I forget the name of the person who, maybe Antonio, who made this comment about the vendors. As a few people said, we do not want to inhibit innovation. We definitely don't want to put, difficult burdens, especially on small businesses. So as we're doing all of this, Antonio, you asked, where does it fit? I think it would be helpful to understand how vendor engagement in, our processes here, where do they fit in all of those pillars, right? I think it would be helpful to somehow include them, have them as a part of the loop, have their perspective so that we avoid having those unintended consequences.
Ravi, that's a great point, and I think we've got multiple perspectives on that will keep us in line, hopefully, as we mull through these. James, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. I've got 2 quick points on the workforce issue. I think one of the ways to approach diving more deeply into this is: are we looking at tools that are that have specific use or more general use? And the tendency seems to be that AI works better when it has specific use cases. So that's the first half of the first point. The second half of the first point is, when we think about workforce and increasing the knowledge of the workforce, making them better capable, it's hands-on, 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 hands-on. Get away from the theory in preparing the workforce and give them hands-on capabilities. My second point is very quickly moving to the challenges of balancing innovation against standards. I think almost all of us in the committee meeting here, we're very familiar with every regulation and every standard you build restricts and constrains innovation. And if you asked me for my bias, I pick innovation over standards any day of the week. Over.
Thanks, James. Carrie, you're up next.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I'm going to go to a prioritization and one flaw I see here. And this is drawing on my work doing standards development with IEEE predominantly. Your first bullet for acquisition workforce, you have 2 issues inside of there that I would strongly suggest pulling apart. The first issue is training and understanding and how should we buy AI. The second issue is how do we use AI in our processes. Those are 2 animals of a different color and nature. And so to conflate them, I think is going to tie your subgroup up in a knot. And this gets me to prioritization, because I think you can move out on looking at, let me go back, prioritization. First thing you need to do, if you haven't had consensus on your definitions and your frameworks within your agency, you're not going to get anywhere on training. You're not going to get anywhere on your terms and conditions. So you have to put unfortunately, because I know the others are important, you have to do the planning first. So you have to get the consensus around the definitions and the frameworks that you're going to use. That has to be done first. Your data readiness also comes up front. So those things can be done concurrently. The reason I say bullet 1 to separate it is because I think you can also pull apart, if you do AI to facilitate the work, you can start looking at those tools now. But to start training and to start developing the terms and conditions, you need those other parts and pieces. You can't do that, and that's putting the cart before the horse. Over.
Thank you, Carrie. And I do want to invite Tim or anyone else at the GSA who's on, if there's a reaction or response to anything you hear, just raise your hand too, or pipe up. Sean, you're up next.
It kind of piggybacks on what Carrie just said as far as the data readiness and the prioritization of it. Do we even know how much at this extent do we have AI process data being used in the environment? And the data governance around data other than AI processed, and how we can kind of apply that as a stopgap just currently to ensure that whatever is being used in the environment can start kind of manipulating the data management and governance practices that are here to comply with AI or to incorporate AI. I'm just concerned that, again, like what Carrie's saying, there are, things that you're doing in the use and the acquisition that if you don't understand how that AI data is being stored, how it's being used, where it is in your environment, you're introducing more risk into the continuation of actually being able to employ AI effectively.
Thank you, Jen. Tim, I don't know if you want to react or.
Yeah,
okay.
I can comment to a little bit of both Carrie's points or whatever. I would agree. There is merging on the acquisition workforce one or whatever. It was the original intent was to give 3 or 4 broad areas that you guys could focus in and drill down. Actually merge some of the things that you said are separate to be because they were workforce related, but different aspects of the same thing. So I agree, but that's the logic of why that was done. For the second point of things that GSA is doing right now and things or whatever, I'm putting into the chat. We do have a tech inventory of AI use cases that we are actively doing, and of course we're also exploring many other use cases and things like that to implement AI that are in various stages of development. And Zach can best comment on that.
Yeah, I can provide a little color commentary. So we've established internal directives that follow M2410 and M2418 in terms of our definitional standards, our process flows for incorporating or understanding what a use case is, what data requirements are identified from that, what are the specific technologies. We've incorporated these 2 governance boards, one for strategic direction and oversight, and 2 a working group that is comprised of folks that are either direct technical specialists or subject matter experts who can weigh in on and fully contextualize the application of a specific AI solution as part of an existing use case. So we have a standard process and set of controls in place, along with the definitions that we're using to identify and contextualize these solutions. And I think that all of your points are really well made in terms of separating out the training of the workforce, which is, again, a separate thread to the actual adoption and usage of this stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate that feedback.
And I'll also add, we really are just, touching on the surface of these topics, and we're lucky to have some GSA experts with us today, but this isn't the end of the flow of information to us, right? So we are going to continue to ask these questions, and the GSA and or other agencies will tee up experts or presentations for us to give us whatever tools or information or background we need to continue to get smarter about these topics and make recommendations. So this isn't the end all be all, and we're going to get sent off to make recommendations. This is going to be an ongoing process. Adriana?
Hi, so I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who has been in a position of having to implement technology, having been the director of product management at City and County of San Francisco in the digital team, and now working on topics of AI ethics and bias. And so with regards to AI acquisition workforce, the line that I've been sharing with folks in the industry who have been asking, well, how should I be thinking about this as a technology practitioner, someone who's actually building the software for use by the public, has been, we're not in the business of using technology because it's new or innovative. We just have to use the right technology at the right time. And with AI in particular, there's a lot of potential for harm, there's a lot of potential for good. And I think that we need to be considering this just as we would be considering any other software or infrastructure selection. And so I would urge that when it comes to how do we think about AI acquisition in a workforce, to give some agency to staff who may have different opinions, and to be able to give them the ability to share and participate in this process. So not just, I hate AI and I don't want to use it, but rather like, what are they concerned about? Are there guidelines and guardrails that they can suggest with regards to rolling out AI, especially when it touches the public? I think that for internal use, for things like speeding up workflow, I think that's a lot of area for innovation. I already see on the list that there are a lot of things that are for internal use, and that's great. But for anything that touches the public, especially with marginalized people, I would consider like involving staff who might have other experiences in other domains too.
Okay, Margaret, you're next.
Yes, I'd like to follow on with Sean's comments about data readiness. You heard it in the opening remarks from Administrator Carnahan, how important it is to be able to share data across boundaries, and not being able to do so has dramatically affected the missions that I've been involved with in the federal government, particularly at DHS, in between DHS, State Department, et cetera. Understanding your data models, being able to understand how the technology uses that data, how it morphs it, what the provenance is, all of the normal things that you look at in an overall data strategy for an organization or between organizations needs to be prioritized, because it's a blocker to successful mission space in the federal government right now. And it's also critical to being able to understand how to protect it, how to understand those boundaries, and how to not introduce bias into the equation in some of these models. So if we're going to start somewhere, I always start with the data, and that can be defined also within clauses and ownership and responsibilities within the contract itself.
Thank you, Margaret. We are running on time for this, so I see Gordon, Ravit, and Dean have their hands up. If you want to just, Gordon, go first, quickly give us your thoughts, and maybe what area you think we should focus on if we're going to prioritize.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I'll go quickly. I'll foot stomp on the importance of data readiness as a blocker across organizations. And the one thing that I'll add to what Margie was saying is the legal and statutory requirements that add to the complexity of building the right data models. And I do have a question as well that relates to that, which is scoping, and this is maybe for the GSA team. These questions are all framed as what GSA is going to do, but of course GSA is a service provider across government through Schedule 70 and other ways. So as we look to tackle these problems, it would be helpful to have some guidance on, are we looking at them just for the sake of GSA's own acquisition and use of AI, or GSA as a service provider of AI across the government?
Gordon, GSA has an impact on about $113 billion in spend across the government based on 24 data. I sit on the FAR Council. GSA thus represents all of the civilian agencies. You've heard bits about the Federal Acquisition Institute, the training arm for all of the civilian agencies. So while we're asking you to tailor recommendations towards GSA, we want to be sure that we are clearly reflecting and explaining GSA's mission and where and how the recommendations that you make and that we implement are not just going to affect GSA, but will have a cascading impact across the landscape of federal acquisition.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I could just jump in, that's exactly the approach that we've taken on the committee the past couple of years when we were focused on sustainability.
Thank you both. Dean?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo and expand upon what James said about terms invariably constrained in some way, and let's favor innovation. I'll highlight that's especially true because the technology is evolving faster than previous technologies. We want to keep that in mind. Also, that it intersects, the terms and conditions intersect with the idea that was raised previously to use AI to facilitate parts of the process. Some terms could make AI processing very difficult and others would not. So that's a consideration to keep in mind.
Thank you. And finally, Ravi.
Thanks. Yeah. I wanted to add a thought on this prioritization question, because I think in reality, we're all just going to have different opinions about this, because it's just like, it's a very deep, issue. But I wonder if a good practical approach is to actually look for, like, we're not going to do, like all of terms and conditions or like all of frameworks, right? Like move on to the next, because each and every one of them is just too much. So instead, I'm thinking, is it more of a question of how can we work in those 4 areas in ways that complement and enhance one another, right? So one potential first step is, we could divide to these groups. Every group kind of maps out some topics that they feel are important, and then we see where the overlap is. And then we have the 4 groups just working on whatever it is that is in the overlap, right? And then we kind of avoid having to make really tough calls into like which one is more important, because they are very much interrelated. Although
Thank you,
I would have
Ravi.
to say I am in favor of the terms and conditions.
I think that's actually a great transition to the next discussion. Stephanie or Troy, do we need a close out on this?
Well, no, I think we just go ahead and transition into the next discussion as far as when you look at these topics for you guys, and we do not have to take all 4 topics. We can just take 2. Which ones do you consider to be the most, either the most urgent or the priority of these topics? And so we can go there, and then we can, Luke, however you would like to proceed as far as the structure and how you handle
And
this.
if I could just jump in also, just based on, the experience of the committee before, I mean, certainly there was a lot of brainstorming after our initial meeting, and new topics emerged for our subcommittees as we were structured before to address. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system for taking up new ideas. But that having been said, we were going to kind of segue into how could we decide to structure ourselves going forward. And so that's what we were going to walk through next, and then see, are we gravitating towards one structure or another? We had Luke and I had thought like another logical step of the committee would be to try to get deeper dives on at least some of these issues that were where we seem to be gravitating as being most important, and do that on January 9th is what we're going to propose as an administrative meeting, to hear from more of the experts at GSA and perhaps elsewhere in the government, just to kind of get the lay of the land of what's going on now. So we thought it would be helpful just to kind of give an overview of how things had worked over the last couple of years. We had 7 full committee meetings over the span of about a year and a half. We produced 3 sets of recommendations. And so with some of those full committee meetings, we were kind of using those as fact-finding on issues that we thought really spanned across all 3 subcommittees. So that I'll kind of give you an idea of the cadence of full committee. And then we had 3 subcommittees, as you can see, addressing policy and practice, industry partnerships, and acquisition workforce. And so going forward, we do not have to structure this way. I'm just giving you this as background. I certainly see that no matter how we structure ourselves, like those three areas, policy and practice, industry partnership, acquisition workforce, I think that'll span any issue that we're taking up. So that's why we wanted to kind of start with a fresh slate. But Luke was a leader on our policy and practice subcommittee, and they established some working groups. So I wanted to give him a chance. And Farad may have had to drop off, but Nicole, are you still on? And just would love also to get their perspectives on having led subcommittees over the past couple of years, plus those of you who have been on the committee, just to get your reflections. But first, Luke, why don't you kind of walk through how the subcommittees worked and the task force model that you set up?
Sure.
With the policy.
So as you can see, it's kind of laid out here. The subcommittees were formed in advance. So we had policy and practice, industry partnerships, and acquisition workforce. And those subcommittees met approximately monthly. They had about 10 to 15 members. There was some overlap between them. And policy and practice, which I chaired, we adopted a slightly different model for tackling recommendations than industry partnerships and acquisition workforce. Because we had some smaller subsets of groups that were particularly interested in topics like single-use plastics, PFAS, a center of excellence, environmental health risks, and sustainable data framework, we further split up into less formal task groups. And that allowed us to be a little more agile, right? Those were the folks that were doing deeper dives and kind of putting pen to paper. And when they would come up with a hypothesis or ideas, we would discuss them at the subcommittee meeting, get input from the rest of the subcommittee, the folks who weren't on the task group. And those ideas continued to evolve, and it eventually got rolled up into the full committee meetings and the full committee reports. If Nicole's here, she was both on policy and practice and chaired, I think, acquisition workforce. If she wants to give her reaction, that would be great too.
Yeah, sure.
Just Nicole. Can I go first, Nicole? Because I have to leave. Is that okay? Thank you, Nicole. Similar to what Luke said, we kind of focused on industry partnerships and went towards the center of excellence. It was important to note that we also had people in different subcommittees on our committee, like Nicole, and at times we'd call on experts like Antonio to talk to us about why it was important to, as you do this acquisition, to talk around the practical matter. There's an academic and a process, but we talked about form and function to make sure that there was inclusion, and so that we were doing this work with responsible sourcing as well as inclusive sourcing. So we wanted to make sure both of those areas were covered. And our group was really big on making sure we had a greater understanding of how the process worked so that we can improve the process to make sure that we had more responsible and inclusive sourcing and get to sustainable ideas. But it was a great group. And much like Luke, we had subcommittee meetings and came back together, wrote reports. I would say the most robust time was when we all came together and were able to share these ideas together to show that there was so much overlap that we were thinking the same, although we were sometimes not in the same room. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Brad. Nicole?
Yeah, sure. So I co-chaired the acquisition workforce subcommittee with Ann Rung, and ours was the smallest subcommittee. So as Luke described, the policy and practice subcommittee having these various task forces, if the acquisition workforce subcommittee did that, we would be like task forces of one person or two people. We were the smallest. And so we tackled all of the issues together. Now, based on the various interests of the individuals involved, they'd be more or less involved. I would say the biggest North Star in that process for us was early on, we created a mission and vision for the subcommittee. Each of the subcommittees did. And that was really our guiding force throughout all of the work that we took on. There were lots of ideas that always came up, that would bubble up, and regardless of how fantastic they were, we would step back and say, okay, how is this going to help us achieve our mission as a subcommittee? And that's what allowed us, I think, to stay focused. But we tackled everything within this space. We didn't have the task force model. So I think there are various ways that you can approach this based on the number of people who are involved and what the general interest of the people were on the subcommittee. David Malone served on that subcommittee with me, others here today. And I think there was just a general interest in how you transition the workforce to embed sustainability across the different touch points. And we tackled training, but we also tackled implementation as well.
That's right. And there was some overlap in the recommendations, and there was some overlap in the subject matter experts that spoke to the different groups. And I think we'll probably see a lot of that here too. Does anyone else have any reactions or suggestions? Carrie?
Are you suggesting keeping the names of the subgroup or the subcommittees the same, or aligning with your 4 bullets?
So I think this was just put up here as an example. This is GAP-FAC 1. If I had to translate it, to me, it almost, those 4 questions can almost be 4 separate subcommittees. And so I'm not sure if that makes sense to the rest of the group, but that was instantly what I thought. There seemed to be enough distinction, but yet some overlap. But I wasn't sure if the group, that's kind of what we want to come to a conclusion to get your input on.
And so may I just ask, Luke, if you don't mind, Troy and Luke? So with the show of hands, with the 4 bullets that you have, with 4 questions, would you guys want to have a subcommittee of 4, or would you like to have a subcommittee of 2 to address the terms and conditions and the data, or seem the ones to bubble up the most? What do you think would be effective for this committee? To have a subcommittee of 4 to address each bullet, or 2. And then you can also take a deep dive into any of the bullets at your own discretion. So Carrie, did I see 3 for you? 3 subcommittees?
Definitely.
I can't see everyone's. Go ahead, Nigel.
Thanks. So I'm listening and trying to understand, because there's a lot of really good comments that highlighted the overlap between the 4 categories. And I'm listening and I'm hearing people, products, and process, right? So the areas where we're talking about workforce and training and readiness, of course, is going to be essential, particularly as we're dealing with some of the challenges that you guys brought up with regards to the risk associated with and implementation of the AI tools and how it serves as a force multiplier. Is there a way to organize around that, what we're talking about? One is the technology itself with regards to data, using it to acquisition, how we purchase it, what we purchase, how we manage that. The people side of it, how we make sure that that the workforce itself is ready, but also that the impact is more positive than negative of what we're doing, and that the impact on other entities, small businesses and so forth, is not a negative one. And then the process side of things with regards to governance frameworks and contract terms. If we're doing 3 of them, would that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's similar to what Carrie has proposed. She's proposed, and not to say that what you've just suggested you can't work into these groups, but she has proposed workforce, terms, and data as 3 groups.
Yeah, is this going to be a final determination, or are we going to have more discussion on this? Because I think we're rushing it a little bit.
We're definitely going to have more discussion. We're due to have a meeting on January the 9th to have some more discussion, but we were just right now trying to get an idea of the number or committees that you guys would like to form around these topics.
I mean, I think there's a solid rationale for the way the subcommittees were originally structured. And maybe the new members of the group don't understand that. If someone wants to talk about how you got to acquisition workforce and industry partnerships and why those subcommittees were chosen, it might be helpful. Because I think there is a continuous link between those subcommittee categories and the work that we're talking about. We can change them for the sake of change, but from my perspective, we're still talking about people, we're still talking about process, we're still talking about the things that those subcommittees would essentially cover. So we're talking about changing them. Before we do that, I would really want folks to understand why they were selected initially.
Yeah, well, David, I mean, those were seen as really like three pillars of what you need to get something accomplished, to have, a competent, well-trained workforce, have, productive government industry relationships, and then have clear and enactable policies and practices. I just think the question would be, is that the framework, or do you kind of do it in reverse and you pick out some of these more specific issues, but then have those three pillars examined within each sub-issue? And I also think we can use the model where, like, you can have some working groups that kind of span other subcommittees. So we just wanted to throw it out to the group to discuss kind of which model we should go with.
Timothy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just some background or whatever, and to tag on to Tori and Carrie's comments. So when we discussed it internally within GSA, and I categorized all of this stuff or whatever across, like, about 20 different suggestions and things that we were looking at, we did notice the common definitions and governance framework, that's not at the bottom for to reflect it being number 4. It's at the bottom to show it was the foundation. It crossed everything. And when I did this graphically, I did do it as 3 different little columns that were put on, and they're supported by that governance and framework and things. So if you, in my thought, from the way the gate was discussing it, if you were going to break it up into large things, this is those top 3 were how it broke up logically, and then the common definitions in governance framework spanned all of the activities.
So as we approach on time, because one thing that we are really respectful of your time, should we all agree to that we will have subcommittees, and we will have at least 3 subcommittees for this particular area? Can we all agree? Show of hands on the screen. If you can use your tools, I'd be very, very appreciative. Thank you so much. So we will have at least 3 subcommittees, and we can name and provide a mission and everything to those committees. Also, question is, at that time, we can also divide and conquer as it pertains to these bullets, and we can decide on when and how we will address these bullets in an additional meeting. With 1 minute to go, believe it or not, we have accomplished something. This is a lot further than we got in our earlier sessions, but I would like Troy or Luke to please provide any kind of closing comments at this time.
Oh, yeah, well, just since we're coming up on time, so thank you for, everyone from GSA who was here today and spoke with us and helped to guide us as we were just starting out here. And I agree, this was kind of a lot to get through, and it's great that we can just kind of agree on some structure, but then provide some details to it later. Again, Luke and I thought we would do an administrative meeting on January 9th where we can get further deep dive into some of these issues, and that can help us kind of fill in the subcommittee structure. So Luke, any final comments from you?
Yes, no, just very happy. Very good to meet you folks. I do think, Stephanie, we need to have a public comment section, right? I'm not sure.
Yes,
Thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. And our apologies due to time, but if there is anyone from the public that would like to make a comment at this time, please do so. Okay, doesn't seem like we have any takers. If there is anyone from the public that would like to provide any kind of comments, you can please submit your comments to the GapFAC at gsa.gov. We'll be happy to review. As Troy mentioned, we will be sending out a meeting invite for January the 9th, 11 to 1, for an administrative meeting to go back over the discussion. It will be a preparatory meeting, so this meeting will not be public. So we ask that you all please be prepared. If there's any questions or concerns or any conflict with your schedules, please let myself or your chairs know. We will also discuss your schedule. We do have a schedule, a draft scheduling guide for as well to help us through this process as we maneuver on and move forward in our success with GAP-FAC. Right now, I'd just like to express my appreciation for your attendance. And at this time, I have to say this meeting will be and is officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.